20. It's directed by Christine Malloy and Joe Lawler, and they both wrote the screenplay. The cast: Anne Skelly plays Rose. Got big problems with my eyes. Orla Brady is Ellen. Arden Gillen is Peter. Annabella Rickaby plays Molly. Catherine Walker plays Teresa. Joanne Crawford is Valerie. Alan Hawley, Dr. Langan, and Sadie Soberel plays Eva. This is a movie about a young woman who wants to track down her parents, and it was given a glowing review by Mark Kermode. It's set in Ireland. The opening scene, a young girl looking out to sea. There's a lighthouse and a sea wall, and she's talking to her parents about memories, about wanting memories of them and hoping that they might want memories of her. It appears to be in black and white. The sea doesn't look particularly calm. It looks quite cold. We appear to be possibly in a university or a college. There's also images of a horse that seems to reflect possibly some stables, or maybe two places knitted together. Students are arriving in a lecture hall to receive a lecture on euthanasia and the healthy animal, which would suggest it's something to do with veterinary work. We then hear the remarks of the lecturer pointing out that pets, healthy animals, are being the subject of requests to vets to put the animal to sleep based on what they perceive as difficult behaviour. And the question posed for these students who look to be potential vets of the future, learning their craft, is how to respond to this killing desire on the part of humans towards perfectly healthy animals. Very interesting topic. Imagery. As she looks at a computer screen, or in the image, or the dream, or the thought process, there's a vehicle that's collided with a tree or possibly something like that. A young woman with bleeding from her face and head, and a police officer investigating how this happened, and then an image of something like a werewolf and a gun being drawn. It's all rather chaotic. It appears that it's some sort of film on the computer, and the young woman has frozen the screen, and we then switch to a daylight after seeing a telephone number for one Ellen, and we see some terraced houses that are rather well to do. The young woman, who I suspect is Rose, rings Ellen, a woman answers, but Rose fails to respond. Could this be her contacting her biological mother? We will find out. We then witness in a veterinary clinic a dog being put to sleep, the owner saying goodbye. Appears though the dog is ill, and there are all these vet students standing around and watching. It's all rather disturbing, it has to be said. A second call from Rose then to Ellen, and she does speak this time, and it becomes clear that she's got the number from her adoption file. Her name was Julie, but she's changed it to Rose. And Ellen on the end of the phone is rather taken aback, because when she clearly gave the child up for adoption, she requested no contact. But I guess the law, when the child becomes an adult, they then take charge of the next step. Ellen appears to be working in a convent, or certainly she's a woman with a religious faith, given her nun uniform. It appears that Ellen is an actress, and that the description of her uniform means that she was playing a part when she was contacted. And Rose in a need to confront her real mother goes on the lookout, and we'll see about that. The process by which Rose tracks down her birth mother is surrounded by a sort of an eeriness in terms of the score and in terms of how the camera focuses on Rose when she arrives at her destination. The whole aspect of it creates a sort of sinister feel to the almost, not voyeurism, but like endangerment. There's a spookiness wrapped around the process of finding, almost with a sort of a hint that something bad might happen. She finds the neighbourhood, and then the house. It's certainly a very upper class neighbourhood where affluence is strident, but she, in the confines of a car, is almost like a detective, a private detective, viewing out, taking on the detail, but in a way where she doesn't want to be noticed by anybody. It's then she tracks down the movie set where a birth mother who's an actress is working, and the sort of the set is outside, and there are lots of people milling around, creating a sort of the picture, the set for the scenes. And Rose is sort of peering from a distance, getting a sort of feel to her birth mother's day-to-day life, getting a picture of her lifestyle, something that's fresh, of course, and new. And after viewing the set and seeing her mother, or we assume that she seems to have worked out who her mother is, Rose returns to her car and she's completely breaks down in tears at the whole exploit, the whole aspect of finding and unwrapping the sort of onion. It's just too much to bear for her after all this time. Rose seems to establish that there's a house for sale that someone assumes she knows or thinks is owned by her birth mother. So she arranges a viewing via the estate agents, goes to the house and meets her birth mother's daughter. The sort of conversation is more friend to friend, but the implications are quite massive, particularly when the daughter asks Rose how old she is, and she states that she's 16, which seems rather odd for someone viewing a property being that young. Eventually Ellen and Rose talk, but it's in a sort of, in a very cautious, slow, deliberate way, without any histrionics or heavy emotions, whether it be sadness or anger. It's more an exploratory, but it's sort of the way it's delivered to the viewer adds on a sort of a heavy presence, a heavy feeling of pain and sorrow by the silence between the discussion is the wrong word, and the natural sounds, starting in a wooded area with nightingale and etc. But it's creating a sort of a mood of sort of uncertainty, of potential danger, to reflect on the painfulness of the situation. Rose asks Ellen for the name of her father, and she's unable to do that. So it's just too painful to say his name. So Rose suggests that she write the name on her phone. We witness a scene which suggests that Ellen is reliving a rape that took place near a golf course. The rape being carried out by Rose's father. As Rose tries to come to terms again with her scenario and believing that she was perhaps wanted and initially, and that she was sent for adoption because of other circumstances like financial or the couple being too young or whatever, but also other options were floating around. Abortion that was eventually taken off the table, and then we switched to the veterinary episode called Lecture, involving the horse. Rose, amongst her fellow students, their task is to ascertain the cause of death of this particular animal by analysing organs from the carcass. It's all very sort of matter of fact, but it's hand in hand with Rose's personal survival, arriving into the world, and that was not exactly a fait accompli. It was a situation that could have changed, where she didn't come into the world. Rose sat on edge that the dormitory areas were staying. She comes across two students having it off, and reacts impulsively and attacks the male. Having established some details regarding her father, she then moves on to tracking him down. For what reason? I'm not sure. She tracks down her father to an archaeological dig, and then introduces herself as an actress working on a project where her character is an archaeologist. She describes herself as Julie, which was her natural name at birth. It's all disguised to get some time to observe him, I would suggest, or again, there's something sinister in her methods. So, moving on, we witness this sort of imagery where Peter Doyle, Rose's father, stroke Julie's father, unbeknown to him, Julie Rose has this imagery of him making a pass at her and carrying out a rape of her, and she finds a pickaxe used in a dig, and the inference is that she attacks him, and at the same time Ellen, her mother, experiences a vision of the same. Then Rose is seen to acquire a syringe full of some chemical which is likely to be used to euthanize animals, a horse particularly, and she seems to steal this from the educational science facility, and the suggestion is that she may well be intending to donate this to Peter Doyle. Julie goes to Doyle's house. He's married, 2 stepdaughters, There's some sort of chit chat, and then she goes to the bathroom to practice her lunging of the syringe. Julie, stroke Rose, goes to Doyle's house. Her intention now with the syringe is to give him a lethal shot. However, Doyle's one step ahead, and he assumes her visit is because she's attracted to him. He tries to lead her down that path by convincing her that's what she wants. But when she makes it clear that she doesn't, he then grabs her by the throat and starts to get her clothing. It mimics the likelihood of what occurred when he raped her mother. She manages to grab a small statue that's on the desk and clouts him across the head. She then fumbles for the syringe, but she then leaves abruptly. Rose goes to see her mother and tells her what happened. Peter's wife, Teresa, returns to the house, sees the blood on his face, sees the statue on the floor, wants an explanation. She clearly knows that her husband is a philanderer. He comes out with his pitiful denial of anything. Suggests that the girl who assaulted him believes that he's the father, but he isn't. His wife casts doubt on that aspersion. And it's a scene that's indicative, really, of this man's behaviour. There's some really poignant scenes in this movie. Another takes place after Rose arrives at her mother's. Her mother shares the fact that she really wanted her first child, meaning Julie, and wanted to hold her, the child, but because she'd agreed to an adoption, of course, that didn't happen. And so she asks if she can hold Rose now, and it happens, and it's sort of draws out the pain of these decisions, even though they were years ago, and the fact that they never leave you, and the fact that you're always struggling to cope with those decisions that, in hindsight, maybe weren't right, or left a feeling of unease inside you. Rose's mother contacts Doyle, arranges to meet him at the location where the rape took place. She meets him and goes back to the incident and recalls it vividly, almost as a sort of cleansing activity, also to remind him of his predatory nature. She then tells Peter that Rose is Julie, is her daughter, and that he tried to rape his own daughter. And then shortly after, she jabs the syringe into his thigh. Peter has a moment and then the mother loads up the syringe, sort of mimicking really the death penalty by injection. It's probably an appropriate way to go for this horrendous male.